The barrel is 31.5 gallons. It is made of white oak, its staves bent by steam, and bound with iron hoops that leave rust rings on the dock wherever it sits. The wood has absorbed so much of its contents over the years that you can smell it from 4 feet away without opening it. The smell is not pleasant. It is thick and animal and faintly sweet, in the way that fat rendered from a living creature always carries something of that creature with it. In the middle of the 19th century, this barrel and 10,000 others like it were the reason cities had light after dark. They were the reason watches ran smooth, the reason mill machinery did not seize and burn, the reason the United States Navy kept its guns operational at sea. Inside each one was oil-pressed or boiled from the blubber of a sperm whale, and the industry that filled them was, for roughly 200 years, one of the most economically significant enterprises in the Western world. It began, as most extractive industries do, with scarcity somewhere else. Northern Europe had been burning animal fat for centuries. Tallow candles, made from rendered beef or mutton fat, were the standard light source for anyone who could not afford beeswax. They smoked, they guttered, they smelled of the slaughterhouse. Wealthy households in Amsterdam and London used imported plant oils in lamps, but those oils were expensive and the supply was unreliable. What Europe needed, and what the expanding merchant economies of the 17th century demanded more of every decade, was a clean-burning, abundant, storable fuel that could be produced at scale. The Basques found the first answer in the North Atlantic. Basque whalers from the coasts of northern Spain and southwestern France had been hunting right whales in the Bay of Biscay since at least the 11th century. By the 1530s, they had followed the whales across the Atlantic to Labrador, where they built seasonal try-works on the shore at a place called Red Bay, boiled blubber in iron cauldrons, and filled barrels with oil they shipped back to Europe. Archaeologists excavating Red Bay in the 1970s and 1980s found the remains of a Basque galleon, the San Juan, sunk in 1565, along with cooperage tools, ceramic vessels, and the bones of bowhead whales stacked in organized piles. The operation at Red Bay at its height employed perhaps 1,000 men and produced up to 20,000 barrels of oil per season. This was not a cottage industry. It was a transatlantic industrial operation running a century before the Mayflower sailed. The Basques kept their whaling grounds secret as long as they could. They failed, the way anyone fails at keeping a commercially valuable secret. Someone with money noticed, hired people who knew, and copied the method. Dutch merchants watched Basque techniques, recruited Basque harpooners, and by the early 1600s, the Dutch had built their own whaling fleet targeting bowhead whales in the waters around Svalbard. At the peak of Dutch Arctic whaling in the 1680s, more than 250 Dutch ships were operating north of Norway each summer, and the town of Smeerenburg on Spitsbergen, a seasonal processing camp, housed hundreds of workers boiling blubber through the midnight sun. The Dutch were producing 50,000 barrels of whale oil per year by some estimates. They sold it to soap makers, leather tanners, rope manufacturers, and lamp oil merchants across Europe. Right whales and bowhead whales are slow. They float when dead. Their blubber layer can be 4 feet thick on a large individual, and a single bowhead might yield 100 barrels of oil. These biological facts made them the target of choice for early European whalers. They also made them catastrophically easy to deplete. By 1700, the bowhead population around Svalbard had collapsed so severely that Dutch whaling in those waters became economically unviable. The industry did not stop. It moved. American whalers, working out of Nantucket and later New Bedford in Massachusetts, had already been hunting right whales along the North American coast since the 1650s. Nantucket Quakers built the early American industry largely from scratch, developing their own shipbuilding traditions and crewing structures. By the early 1700s, coastal right whales near New England were also depleted, and the Nantucketers faced the same problem the Dutch had faced. The animals nearest to port were gone. What saved the American industry and transformed it into something genuinely different from anything before it was the sperm whale. The sperm whale is not like the right whale or the bowhead. It is faster, more aggressive, capable of diving to depths exceeding 3,000 feet in pursuit of giant squid, and when harpooned, it does not always simply die. There are documented cases from the 18th and 19th centuries of sperm whales turning on the boats, hunting them, ramming them, shattering oars, killing men. The spermaceti organ in a sperm whale's enormous head contains a waxy liquid unlike any other biological substance. At body temperature, it is an oil. Cooled to room temperature, it crystallizes into a white wax. This substance, spermaceti, burns with an exceptionally clear, bright, nearly smokeless flame. When the first candles made from spermaceti appeared in the 1750s, they were immediately recognized as superior to anything else available. The United States government eventually adopted spermaceti candles as the official standard unit of light measurement. One candle power was defined as the light produced by a pure spermaceti candle weighing 1/6 of a pound, burning at a rate of 120 grains per hour. The sperm whale's head had become a unit of scientific measurement. Beyond spermaceti, sperm whale oil itself had properties that other whale oils lacked. It remained fluid at low temperatures where other oils congealed. It did not corrode metal surfaces. In the rapidly mechanizing industries of the late 18th and 19th centuries, these properties made sperm oil indispensable as a lubricant for precision machinery. The watchmaking industry in Switzerland used it. Textile mills in England and Massachusetts used it. The United States government purchased it in quantity to maintain the mechanisms of lighthouse lenses. The hunting of sperm whales required ships capable of months-long ocean voyages, because sperm whales were found in the deep tropical and subtropical oceans, not in northern coastal waters. American whalers developed the full-ship tryworks, a brick furnace built directly on the deck of the vessel with iron cauldrons, so that blubber could be rendered at sea rather than carried raw to a shore station. This innovation unchained American whaling from geography entirely. A New Bedford whale ship could leave port, round Cape Horn, hunt across the Pacific, and return 3 or 4 years later with a full cargo hold. The crew might not see land for stretches of 6 or 8 months at a time. Herman Melville sailed on the whale ship Acushnet out of New Bedford in January 1841 and jumped ship in the Marquesas Islands 18 months later. What he saw in those 18 months, the physical reality of the ship, the hierarchy of the crew, the actual process of killing and processing a sperm whale alongside the boat, became the material for Moby Dick, published in 1851. The novel is, among other things, the most detailed technical account of the 19th century American whaling industry ever written. Melville described the cutting-in process, in which the whale's blubber is stripped in a spiral from the carcass while the body rotates in the water alongside the ship. He described the trypots where blubber was boiled down, fueled in part by the crisp residue of previously processed blubber, so that the whale effectively cooked itself. He described the bailers who lowered buckets into the spermaceti case in the whale's head to remove the liquid before it was pumped out. None of this was metaphor. He was recording industrial procedure. New Bedford, Massachusetts became the center of this industry and one of the wealthiest cities in the United States as a result. In 1857, at the industry's absolute height, 329 whale ships were registered out of New Bedford. The city's per capita income was the highest in the country. The stone mansions on County Street were built by whale oil merchants. The Seaman's Bethel on Johnny Cake Hill, where Melville heard Father Mapple preach before he sailed, had memorial tablets on its walls listing sailors killed by whales across decades of Pacific hunting. The numbers behind that wealth were biological catastrophe in motion. American whalers killed somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 sperm whales between 1800 and 1880, according to population modeling published by researchers, including Hal Whitehead of Dalhousie University. The Pacific sperm whale population, which may have been around 1.1 million individuals before industrial hunting began, had been reduced to perhaps 29% of that number by the time commercial whaling effectively ended in the 20th century. American whalers hunted across the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and Antarctic Oceans, opening new grounds whenever old ones showed declining catches. They reached the Okhotsk Sea off Russia's Pacific coast in the 1840s. They hunted in the waters off Japan. They pushed south toward Antarctica. Each new ground produced large catches for a decade or two and then declined. The industry saw this happening. Whalers' logs from the 1840s onward record falling catch rates and the increasing difficulty of finding whales in grounds that had been productive a generation earlier. The response was not to stop. The response was to go further. What ended American whaling was not a decision to stop killing whales. It was a cheaper liquid found underground in Pennsylvania. Edwin Drake drilled the first successful commercial oil well at Titusville, Pennsylvania in August 1859. The well produced approximately 25 barrels of petroleum per day. Within 2 years, Pennsylvania oil production had reached 2,000 barrels per day. Refined petroleum, kerosene specifically, was cheaper to produce than whale oil, burned cleanly in lamps, and could be extracted without sending men across the Pacific for 3 years at a time. The price of sperm oil, which had been around $1.77 per gallon in the late 1850s, could not compete. Petroleum did not eliminate whale oil immediately because sperm oil's lubricating properties had no direct petroleum equivalent for some industrial applications. But the lamp oil market, which had been the largest market for whale products, collapsed within a decade of Drake's well. The American fleet shrank rapidly. The Civil War accelerated the decline when the Union government purchased and sank 45 old whale ships as part of the Stone Fleet, deliberately blockading Confederate harbors with hulks packed with stone and gravel. Confederate raiders destroyed 40 more whale ships at sea. By the war's end, the fleet had lost roughly a third of its tonnage, and the economic case for rebuilding it had weakened considerably. New Bedford's whale oil merchants did not go bankrupt overnight. Many pivoted to textile manufacturing, using the same capital and labor networks. The city's economy survived. The fleet did not. By 1880, fewer than 150 American whale ships were still operating. By 1900, the number was under 50. The last American sperm whaling voyage ended in 1925, when the bark Wanderer, out of New Bedford, was wrecked in a storm off Cuttyhunk Island before it had gone anywhere. The owners did not send another ship. The era was over before most people noticed it was ending. What petroleum replaced in the lamp was straightforward. What it could not immediately replace was the lubricating oil market, and this gap produced one of the stranger second acts in the history of whale products. Sperm oil remained in use as an industrial lubricant well into the 20th century, particularly in applications involving extreme pressure or temperature. The United States Navy used sperm oil to lubricate certain weapon systems and mechanical components through the Second World War and into the 1960s. When the Endangered Species Act passed in 1973 and sperm whales received full federal protection, the Navy faced a practical problem. It needed a substitute for a lubricant it had been using for decades. The substitute came from a desert shrub. Jojoba, a plant native to the Sonoran Desert growing across Arizona, California, and northern Mexico, produces a seed whose oil is not technically an oil at all. It is a liquid wax ester, chemically similar to sperm whale oil in ways that make it an effective substitute for the same applications. When the United States banned the import of sperm whale products in 1971 under the Marine Mammal Protection Act and then extended full protection to sperm whales under the Endangered Species Act, American industry had approximately 2 years to find replacements for a substance it had depended on for over a century. Jojoba cultivation expanded rapidly in the American Southwest through the 1970s and 1980s. Arizona farmers planted thousands of acres. The United States Department of Agriculture funded research into cultivation and processing. Jojoba oil is now found in cosmetics, industrial lubricants, and pharmaceutical applications. Global production runs to several thousand tons per year. The industry exists because sperm whales exist and are protected, which means it exists because sperm whales nearly do not exist, which means it exists because for 2 centuries the world lit its streets and lubricated its machines with the processed fat of animals hunted to the edge of extinction in every ocean on Earth. The sperm whale population is recovering, slowly. Current estimates from the International Whaling Commission place the global sperm whale population somewhere between 300,000 and 450,000 individuals, up from the post-industrial low, but still well below pre-whaling numbers. Sperm whales live up to 70 years. Females do not reach sexual maturity until around age 9, and typically give birth to 1 calf every 4 to 6 years. A population recovering from 2 centuries of industrial hunting does not recover quickly. The whales alive in the Pacific right now are perhaps the grandchildren or great-grandchildren of whales that survived the fleets out of New Bedford. There is a town in the Azores, the Portuguese island chain in the mid-Atlantic, called Lajes do Pico. Until 1984, men in Lajes do Pico were still hunting sperm whales from open boats using hand-thrown harpoons. The same basic technique developed by Basque and American whalers 3 centuries earlier. Portugal was the last country in the Western world to practice traditional open-boat sperm whaling. In 1984, under pressure from the International Whaling Commission and international conservation organizations, Portugal ended commercial whaling entirely. The last whale killed in Lajes do Pico is recorded in the Municipal Whale Museum there, which occupies the old processing factory beside the harbor. The museum displays the harpoons, the boats, the flensing knives, and the iron tripods. It also displays photographs of the men who used them, none of whom are young in the photographs. The factory floor smells, faintly, of something animal and rendered even now.